History often remembers those who commanded armies, ruled nations, or reshaped the political landscape of their age. Their names are engraved upon monuments, their victories are studied in classrooms, and their achievements continue to inspire generations. Yet, hidden beneath the grand narratives of war and power are quieter stories of extraordinary courage, stories of ordinary individuals whose greatest act was simply refusing to abandon their humanity when the world around them had surrendered to hatred. Among these forgotten heroes stands a woman whose determination saved the lives of thousands of innocent children, despite knowing that discovery would almost certainly lead to torture and death. Her name was Irena Sendler, and although she never considered herself a hero, history has come to recognize her as one of the bravest humanitarians of the 20th century. To understand the magnitude of her courage, it is necessary to understand the world in which she lived. In September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, marking the beginning of the Second World War. Within weeks, the country had fallen under occupation, and a systematic campaign of persecution against the Jewish population began to unfold. Families who had lived peacefully for generations suddenly found themselves stripped of their rights, their property, and ultimately their freedom. Jewish businesses were confiscated, schools were closed, and entire communities were forced from their homes under increasingly brutal restrictions that left little doubt about the intentions of the occupying regime. In the heart of Warsaw, the Nazis established what would become the largest Jewish ghetto in occupied Europe. Enclosed by high walls, topped with barbed wire, the Warsaw Ghetto confined more than 400,000 people within an area far too small to sustain them. Food was rationed to starvation levels, medicines were almost impossible to obtain, and overcrowding created the perfect conditions for disease to spread. Every street reflected the consequences of deliberate cruelty. Children wandered barefoot in search of scraps of food, exhausted parents struggled to keep their families alive, and countless people died from hunger and illness long before they were ever transported to the extermination camps that awaited many of them. Outside those walls, daily life continued under constant fear, but inside the ghetto, survival itself had become an act of resistance. Few people possessed either the opportunity or the courage to intervene, because the German authorities had made the consequences unmistakably clear. Any individual caught sheltering or assisting Jewish citizens faced immediate execution, and in many cases, entire families were killed alongside them. Compassion had effectively been criminalized, forcing ordinary people to choose between preserving their own lives or risking everything to help strangers. It was during these terrifying years that Irena Sendler emerged as an unlikely rescuer. Born in Warsaw in 1910, she had been raised in a household where kindness was regarded not as an extraordinary virtue, but as a basic human responsibility. Her father, Dr. Stanisław Sendler, devoted much of his medical practice to treating poor patients who could not afford health care, many of whom were Jewish. At a time when prejudice was already widespread, he refused to discriminate between those who sought his help. His belief was simple: a physician's duty was to save lives, not judge them. Before his death, he left his daughter with a lesson that would remain with her for the rest of her life. Whenever someone was drowning, he told her the only acceptable response was to reach out and help, regardless of who that person might be. Those words became the moral foundation upon which Irena would build every decision she later made. By the time Germany occupied Poland, Irena was working as a social worker for the Warsaw Welfare Department. Her responsibilities included assisting vulnerable families, providing medical support, and addressing public health concerns. Because infectious diseases posed a serious threat to both the ghetto and the surrounding city, social workers and medical personnel occasionally received permission to enter the sealed district to inspect sanitary conditions. For most officials, these visits represented routine administrative duties. For Irena, they became an opportunity to witness suffering that much of the outside world preferred not to see. Every visit left a deeper impression upon her conscience. She encountered children weakened by starvation, parents who had exhausted every possible means of protecting their families, and entire neighborhoods where hope itself seemed to be disappearing. She understood that humanitarian aid alone could never solve the catastrophe unfolding inside those walls. Food and medicine could provide temporary relief, but they could not protect children from the deportations that were becoming increasingly frequent. Rumors of mass killings had already begun to circulate, and although the full scale of the Holocaust was not yet widely understood, it was becoming painfully clear that remaining inside the ghetto meant facing almost certain death. Faced with this reality, Irena arrived at a decision that would define the rest of her life. If she could not save everyone, then she would save as many children as humanly possible. It was an ambition that bordered on the impossible, because rescuing even a single child required careful planning, complete secrecy, and extraordinary courage from everyone involved. Every entrance to the ghetto was guarded by German soldiers, every movement was monitored, and every successful escape increased the likelihood that the authorities would eventually uncover the network responsible. Yet history has often been shaped by individuals who refuse to measure their actions by the probability of success. Instead of asking whether the task could be accomplished, Irena chose to ask whether she could continue living with herself if she did nothing at all. That single question transformed an ordinary social worker into one of history's greatest rescuers and marked the beginning of a mission that would eventually save approximately 2,500 children from one of humanity's darkest chapters. Irena soon realized that rescuing children from the Warsaw Ghetto required far more than courage alone. Every successful escape depended upon an intricate network of doctors, nurses, priests, orphanages, convents, foster families, and members of the Polish resistance, all of whom accepted the possibility that a single mistake could cost them their lives. The operation demanded absolute secrecy because the German authorities imposed one of the harshest laws in occupied Europe. Anyone caught assisting Jewish people faced immediate execution, and often their entire family would share the same fate. Despite this terrifying reality, dozens of ordinary men and women chose to become part of a mission that rested not upon military strength, but upon trust, compassion, and remarkable determination. Each rescue presented a different challenge, leaving little room for routine or predictable methods. Infants were sometimes hidden inside wooden crates, toolboxes, or beneath blankets in ambulances that entered the ghetto under the pretext of transporting medical supplies. Older children occasionally escaped through underground passages, concealed doorways, or buildings that connected different sections of the city. Every route carried enormous risk, and every child had to remain silent, even in moments of overwhelming fear. A single cry at the wrong moment could expose not only the child, but everyone involved in the rescue. The most painful obstacle, however, was rarely the danger posed by German soldiers. It was the impossible decision that confronted every parent. Mothers and fathers understood that allowing their children to leave with strangers offered the only realistic chance of survival, yet it also meant accepting that they might never see them again. Many hesitated, unable to imagine handing their son or daughter to someone they had met only moments before. Others found the strength to do so because remaining inside the ghetto promised an even more certain tragedy. Irena never underestimated the weight of that sacrifice, and she treated every child entrusted to her care as a solemn promise that their parents' faith would not be betrayed. Because many of the rescued children were placed with Christian families or religious institutions, they were often given new names and identities to protect them from discovery. They learned new prayers, new customs, and entirely new lives, all while carrying memories that no child should ever have to bear. Yet Irena understood that these temporary identities could not erase who they truly were. She believed that if the war ever ended, every child deserved the opportunity to reclaim their real name and, if possible, be reunited with surviving relatives. For that reason, she carefully recorded the original names of the rescued children alongside the identities they had been given after their escape. These precious records were written on small slips of paper, sealed inside glass jars, and buried beneath an apple tree in the garden of a trusted friend. Those humble containers held far more than names. They preserved the possibility that families separated by unimaginable violence might someday find one another again. At a time when entire communities were being erased from existence, the jars became symbols of hope, memory, and the refusal to allow innocent lives to disappear into history without a trace. As the months passed, the German campaign against the Jewish population grew even more relentless. Deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto intensified, and reports of extermination camps confirmed the horrifying truth that many had feared but struggled to believe. Every child rescued by Irena's network represented a race against time, because each passing day reduced the chances of saving those who remained behind the walls. The pressure upon the resistance increased accordingly, and so did the danger of betrayal. In October 1943, that danger finally caught up with Irena Sendler. She was arrested by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, and taken to Pawiak prison, a place notorious for brutal interrogations and unimaginable suffering. Her captors demanded the names of every person involved in the rescue operation, the locations where the children had been hidden, and the records that could expose the entire network. They believed that enough pain would eventually force her to speak. The interrogations were merciless. Irena was severely beaten, and her legs and feet were broken during the torture. Yet despite enduring agony that few people could imagine, she refused to reveal a single name. Neither the identities of the rescued children nor those of her fellow rescuers ever left her lips. She understood that one confession would condemn hundreds of innocent people, and she chose to endure unbearable suffering rather than betray the trust that so many families had placed in her. Eventually, the Gestapo sentenced her to death. For most prisoners, such a sentence marked the end of all hope. Yet even in those desperate circumstances, courage continued to flourish beyond the prison walls. Members of the Polish resistance managed to bribe one of the German guards responsible for carrying out the execution. On the day she was meant to die, Irena was secretly released and instructed to disappear immediately. Official German records falsely reported that she had been executed, allowing her to continue living in hiding while supporting the resistance under a false identity for the remainder of the war. When Germany finally surrendered in 1945, Europe emerged from years of devastation, unlike anything it had experienced before. Cities lay in ruins, millions of lives had been lost, and countless families searched desperately for loved ones who would never return. Amid this overwhelming tragedy, Irena returned to the place where the glass jars had remained hidden throughout the occupation. Carefully recovering the fragile records, she began the heartbreaking task of identifying the children whose lives had been saved. For some, reunions proved possible. For many others, they did not. Entire families had been murdered in concentration and extermination camps, leaving no parents, grandparents, or siblings to welcome the children home. The names preserved inside those jars therefore became more than a record of survival. They stood as a lasting testimony to families destroyed by hatred and to one woman's determination that their identities would never be forgotten. Remarkably, Irena Sendler's extraordinary achievements remained largely unknown for decades. She never sought recognition, rarely spoke publicly about her experiences, and considered her actions to be nothing more than a moral obligation. It was only in the late 20th century, when students researching the Holocaust uncovered her story, that the wider world finally began to appreciate the scale of what she had accomplished. Honors and awards eventually followed, but they arrived long after the events that had defined her life. When asked about her courage, Irena consistently rejected the idea that she was a hero. She often reflected that she could have done more and regretted every child she had been unable to save. Such humility is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of her character. While history remembers the astonishing number of lives she rescued, she remembered only those she could not reach in time. The story of Irena Sendler reminds us that history is not shaped solely by kings, presidents, or military commanders. It is also shaped by ordinary individuals who choose compassion over indifference, conscience over fear, and humanity over hatred. In an age defined by unimaginable cruelty, she demonstrated that true courage does not always announce itself through dramatic acts of heroism. Sometimes it reveals itself quietly in the determination to protect a frightened child, to keep a promise made to desperate parents, and to preserve hope when the world seems determined to extinguish it. Although Irena Sendler passed away in 2008, the legacy she left behind continues to inspire people across the world. Every one of the approximately 2,500 children she helped rescue represents generations of lives that might never have existed had she chosen the safety of silence over the uncertainty of action. Her story endures because it reminds us that even during humanity's darkest moments, the choices of a single individual can illuminate history with extraordinary courage, proving that one person's compassion truly has the power to change the world.